Hi, I'm Dave Kale. Welcome to this Christian Business Insights podcast show where my goal is to provide you with practical, actionable ideas to help you create businesses and careers of excellence and at the same time multiply your influence for the kingdom. I have been a Christian in business for over 30 years, and I have personally and contractually consulted with over 500 different sales organizations. So in these podcasts, I combine the lessons that I have learned with an out-of-the-box experience and perspective on Christianity that you will find challenging. And we put that together to provide you with practical insights and ideas that you can use to live better and lead better. Welcome to the journey. Hi, this is Dave. Do you ever really pray hard for something and see some great opportunity in front of you, and all at once God says no and closes the door? You're thinking, what on earth just happened? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today, when God says no. So how familiar does this sound? You have an opportunity that looks like it could be huge for your personal life or your business. And so you've studied it, you've done your homework, you're convinced that this would be the next big step for you. You even consult some Christian friends, get their opinion. You make it the focus of intense prayers, and it looks like an open door that you are eager to rush through. And then the Lord says no and slams the door shut. And you think, what was that? Why did that happen? And you're frustrated and discouraged. So before we dig into this, let me share a couple of those situations from my life where God said no to something I was enthusiastic about. First, when I was a young man in my 30s, I had created a unique video training program and ran into a person who had a great network, a sterling reputation, and a couple of retail stores that catered to the same market that I was trying to sell my video training program. He was a well-known preacher, and this was his side business. So we began to discuss merging the two businesses and using his network to promote the video training. We had a deal sketched out. It would require me to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma. My wife and I went there, stayed in his home. His family was away on vacation, but we used his home and as a base, and we searched the real estate market for a home. We put an offer on one and headed home, ready to move and do the deal. And you know what? We never heard from him again. He would not return phone calls, would not correspond with me. It was as if he dropped off the earth. Now, this was long before people talk about being ghosted, but it was my first experience with that. No explanation, no response, nothing. I was somehow expecting something more from him. To this day, I have never heard from him. He was ghosting me before we had the term. Clearly, this deal was not going to happen. And while I was intensely disappointed, I later came to see that the Lord was in this, leading me in a different direction, but that was in retrospect. Later, as I was in the early stages of my consulting practice, I had a similar experience. I met someone who had a compatible business serving the same market. We had several meetings about working together and putting together an agreement, and we did. We put together an agreement, and he and his wife treated my wife and me to an expensive dinner to celebrate the new deal. And then he, like my previous proposed business partner, just disappeared. No explanation, not even the courtesy of a phone call. He would not take my calls, would not speak to me, and just disappeared from my life. I would never hear from him again. No explanation, no response, no comment. He just disappeared. Again, I felt like it was a major step backwards, and I was incredibly disappointed at the time. Today, however, I see how the Lord saved me from a partnership that would have been toxic. Now, over the years, I had several more of these major potential opportunities or movements that looked good from my perspective, but never came to fruition. And at the time, they were incredibly disappointing. But from today's perspective, I saw that the Lord was preventing me from making a major mistake. Here's the most recent. I don't know, am I weird in that I have all these experiences? Man, I don't know. A few years ago, I began to de-emphasize my speaking practice as I was at the point where I just did not want to travel as much. And as a result, I felt like I had extra time and energy to put into something else. And I've been a home winemaker for 30 years. And at one point, I even had a small vineyard. I always wanted to have a boutique winery, and it looked like this was the time. So I put together a business plan. I created the list of wines we would make, identified the equipment, I identified the vendors, I registered the business, I created a name, a logo, I acquired the website domains, I developed a marketing plan. I mean, I had everything together, and all I needed was some investors. And so, using the business plan, I solicited investors and had a full complement within a few months. I mean, the thing was totally funded. So we had the plan, we had the details, we had the logo, we had the domains, we had the money. All we needed was to acquire a location and then apply for the licenses. We were just a few months away from being in business. And over the next few months, this is so weird, over the next few months, we put offers on 5 different locations. And each one fell through for the weirdest of reasons. One, when he heard I was a Christian, then changed the terms of the offer and demanded 6 months' rent up front. Another, we made an offer exactly what he was asking for, and they never replied. I mean, they never responded. My real estate agent hounded them for weeks. They just never replied. Neither a no nor a counteroffer, nothing. Like, how weird is that? Finally, we found another location, and we were about to make another offer. Then COVID hit, and we decided it was not the time to start a new retail business and call a halt to our efforts. It didn't take me long this time, and I immediately sensed the Lord intervening to save us from what would have been a bad investment. In fact, that was the thread that ran through these and other similar situations. God knew the situation and the people better than I did, and each time intervened, sometimes in ways that seemed, well, less than upright, But each time, I was providentially prevented from making a commitment that would have changed the trajectory of my career and maybe my life. Now, looking back at that, here's some things I learned. Number 1, the Lord has my back. He has planned for me, my career, my life, and will intervene to keep me on that path. I'm reminded of Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. What looks like a bad thing at the moment is really something that's going to work out for the good. And I've seen it. I see it now in retrospect. In each case, the no to the opportunity was a far more beneficial resolution than if I'd gone ahead with any of them on my own. That's the first thing I learned. Second thing, the resolution of the opportunity didn't ever result in a quick and dramatic alternative. In other words, when one potential partnership fell apart, another one did not immediately rise to take its place. So rather, I found myself slogging it out, doing the same thing I'd done before the thwarted opportunity. It wasn't like the Lord said no to this because he wanted to take another exciting opportunity. It wasn't, here's this closed door, Dave, but here's an open one. Nope, there wasn't any open one. It was just a simple no without any open door, appearing somewhere else. I think there's an expression, when the Lord closes a door, he opens another one. I'm not so sure I agree with that. Not from my experience. Sometimes he just closes the door. There were weird events. Here's number 3 in my list of lessons that I learned. There were weird events associated with each of these thwarted opportunities. The ghosting by mature men, successful Christian business people, that just struck me as odd. The reasons for our not signing the lease for the winery were literally unprecedented. It just didn't seem like these things were everyday occurrences. They were weird. And fourth, in every case, the opportunity was a proactive effort on my part to build something additional to what I was doing. See, I pursued both of the joint venture deals, and I created the winery plan. In other words, in retrospect, I see each of these as me initiating the action rather than letting the Lord develop them and bring them to me. Well, each of these no's from the Lord were, at the time, disappointing and frustrating. At this point in my life, I am thankful for them. Had the Lord not intervened, my life and career may have gone in a completely different direction. Clearly, the Lord had a plan for my career to my benefit and intervened to keep me on course. I suspect he operates the same way in your life. Hey, before I go, I want to remind you about our Sales Leaders Excellence and Influence course. This is a 8-session combination of online training and live Zoom meetings where we teach something we call the KOA Sales Management System, which is a method to supervise salespeople who are remote. You don't see them. They're not in the office every day hanging around. And we've taught this to over 2,000, maybe even going on 3,000 now people. It's an incredibly powerful course. If you supervise salespeople, whether you're a CEO and you got 1 or 2 guys, or you're one of 17 sales managers in your organization, doesn't matter. If you supervise salespeople, this is the course for you. You're going to get ideas and techniques and strategies and processes and practices that are going to impact your sales team immediately and enhance your career for the rest of your career. Put a note in put a link in the show notes. We're starting it in January. It's limited registration, so don't wait. Jump on it right now. Okay, that's it. We're done. Bye-bye.